The other Hollywood action is happening out in Florida. That would be Hollywood, Florida, which is one city in Florida's 23rd congressional district, a strongly Democratic district currently represented by the odious Debbie Wasserman Schultz. In a world of dishonest, morally corrupt, vain, and narcissistic politicians, Wasserman Schultz stands out. She's Trump like in that sense. Now, I have a little history with her. When she ran the Democratic National Committee as her own personal fiefdom, trying to advance not the party, but her own personal career. And to that end, she saw her career trajectory taking the next step if Hillary Clinton became president. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz did everything possible to undermine Bernie Sanders. This isn't a conspiracy theory. WikiLeaks laid out in detail all the dirty dealings in the back rooms when it released that trove of emails back then. Now, at the time, I was in 2016 a national surrogate for Bernie Sanders and was doing a ton of TV advocacy for him, especially on CNN. And I found out, and I wasn't looking for this. This was something that someone else saw and sent me a little heads up about. I found out that, like hundreds of others who were not loyal to the coronation plan, I was being tracked by the DNC, as you can see from this specific email, and I'll describe it for my audio audience. It's an internal DNC email with the subject heading, Mr. President, we need a new DNC chair, which was just the title of an op ed piece I wrote urging Barack Obama, who was president at the time, of course, to sack Wasserman Schultz. The contents of the email are brief. Quote, not enough to have him on TV every hour. CNN now printing op eds from Ticini, end quote. The point really here is that Wasserman Schultz created a culture inside the DNC that was biased and anti democratic, and she needed to be sacked from the DNC, which eventually happened just before the convention. And in my opinion, she still needs to go and be sacked from public life. And that's where Jen Perelman comes in. Jen is challenging Wasserman Schultz in the Democratic primary, which is next week, or at least that's the specific day of the deadline for in person polling booth elections, because thousands of Floridians do early voting, as you may know. You've seen those lines, and they are already lining up each day to cast a ballot. Jen's website is jen2020.com. And this is fun. I caught up with her as she was out talking to voters. And Jen, when we spoke to set this up, you asked me if it was okay if you could actually appear, I guess, in what we would say campaign garb, campaign
Yeah.
clothes. And you're really at the end of the campaign trail. So, of course, I was very happy to have you on as is. And I want to describe for my audio listeners that Jen is in complete campaign regalia with her sunglasses now perched on her
Great.
head. She's got her actual T-shirt, which talks about her campaign, and she's out
And
there in the
paid
polling place.
volunteer.
So,
Yeah.
and with your volunteer, so describe actually, give us a little sense of where you are and what's happening.
So I am at the Weston Regional Library, which is one of our early polling locations in my district. And this is actually a really good location because every car has to drive by one main place. A lot of the locations are much harder to really kind of capture. And you can see if I turn around, see all these people back there?
Yep.
All those people are all standing and campaigning for candidates and holding up signs. And we are actually today, my campaign manager and I, we drive around and we're delivering lunch to our people that are working the polls.
Mhm. So when you go up to talk to people or interact with people who are waiting in line for early voting, I assume this is probably asking the obvious question that the whole pandemic coronavirus has structured the way you campaign in a different way.
Well, we actually were shut down for about a month and a half when this all first hit, and we lost about 6 weeks of canvassing time, which was not ideal. But we have been still canvassing now. We do with socially distant canvassing. A lot of where we just have all of our volunteers are walking around with masks, and a lot of times we just leave door hangers on doors. We still do knocking. Just depends. And really, it's just been a matter of that the polls are really slow. And I think a lot of that is because we've been encouraging everybody for months to do vote by mail and request vote by mail. And, so we've been pushing that so hard for months that we shouldn't be surprised that we're now having low in person turnout.
Mhm. So there's been a lot of talk about the challenges of voting in this moment, voting by mail or voting in person. Are you seeing that at all in your district? Are you concerned about the ability to turn out voters?
There is definitely concern about vote by mail. And I'll tell you what I have noticed that's interesting that I never saw before is the amount of people that are coming to polling locations to drop off their vote by mail
Mm.
ballots. So that a lot of people request a vote by mail. I'd say about half the people coming into every polling place has already filled out their ballot and they're already walking in with it sealed to just deposit it here.
So that they're jumping across the problem of it getting, say, from their home to the polling place.
Correct. Well, that and they're not relying on the post office.
Yeah,
They're
which
not relying on the mail. They're putting it in every one of our polling places, and I think this is very smart anyway, but because of COVID, there's all these drop boxes. So a lot of people are coming up and just dropping it instead of mailing it.
Hmm. So you're a great progressive candidate on all the issues, but I have to say you had me at 3 words, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And I have a little history in this. You may know that when I was a surrogate for Bernie Sanders in 2016, when Wasserman Schultz was also the chair of the Democratic Party, she and her underlings were tracking me and many others in emails
Mm.
and being very upset at the fact that somehow we were out there in the media talking about Bernie because, of course, she was among that group of folks who were essentially trying to get across the line the anointed candidate from the standpoint of the establishment. But I want to actually ask the question, how much of your campaign is about her versus what you're trying to articulate? Obviously, that's a tough balance sometimes to do because you are running against an incumbent.
I'd like to think that we've made so much inroads and progress building coalitions to serve the community. Our campaign has always been about public service and not a career. That's the whole point of this.
Mm,
I do think that she being the opponent makes it easier for us as far as fundraising because
mm,
she is like kind of the nemesis of a lot of the Bernie supporters around the country. And so, it's sort of like she's the bonus. That's the bonus. But what we're really trying to do is so much bigger than just her. She's, you know, she's just one that people knows because of 2016, but there are so many corporate entrenched incumbents. And so we have garnered a lot of support that's really support for us
mm.
and not just a vote against her. And I think that is something that's very different than what we saw in 2016 when she was challenged.
Yes, and I wanna say that it is true that Bernie folks have a particular axe to grind with her because of the way in which she manipulated the party and essentially attempted to throw the nomination to Hillary Clinton. But I have to say, and I'll tell you this honestly, when I spoke to even insiders in the party at that time, they were no big fans of hers. Lots of them did not like her because she stands head and shoulders above many politicians as being completely an egomaniac driven
Yeah.
by her own agenda, and that's saying a lot among the political class, but there is a sense that she is especially immoral and not fit to serve and is not representing the interest of the people. But to your point, you are trying to actually articulate why you should be elected and why actually she only got 56% of the vote, I believe, in the last time she was challenged. So you actually have a huge base of people who want an alternative.
Yeah, we do. And, you can really see it. It's really generational. It's very generational. And when I go to anything where it's her people are working there or whatever, it's all hired people that she just has working polls. Whereas I have like I don't even know how many of these young kids, they're young kids, high school and college kids that are out running around and when the lights turn red, they're dancing in the streets with my signs. And there's this enthusiasm that you can't get that by paying people, right? So she's got people sitting in a chair at every location on their phone holding a sign for her.
Mhm.
That's what she's got. I've got like this momentum, and you can't buy that. You can't. And so I think ultimately this is eventually going to turn. Now, hopefully it turns for us this year, but it is turning
Mhm.
because the generational divide, there's more and more young people and more old people dying off. So that's the reality. But I don't even like to really talk about her.
Mm.
We represent doing what people want. 72% of the American people want Medicare for all. She's not going to support Medicare for all because she takes big pharma money, right? And private insurance money. So this isn't about her. It's just about we want to get these things done. And it's not going to happen with her because she's beholden to other interests.
Mhm.
So it's just we have to kind of go around this. That's what we're trying to do.
I read all your positions on your website, and one of the things that came out, and I think it's kind of a fascinating one to talk about, is you're addressing the Green New Deal, your support of the Green New Deal, but the way you put it in context, you talked about the way in which Big Sugar is one of the largest polluters in the state, and she
Mhm.
gets money from Big Sugar. Explain what specifically Big Sugar does to be a polluter, because I think
Okay.
most of us really don't know.
Right. Well, Big Sugar is one of several industrial agricultural polluters. There are others, but Big Sugar is particularly large here in Florida. And essentially, they are set up, their plant on the southern edge of Lake Okeechobee. And if you look on a map of Florida, you see this sort of lake in the middle, and that's Lake Okeechobee. And if you can imagine along the southern coast of that, you've got these industrial plants. And that area is where the water used to drain through, get cleansed, and go through into the Everglades. And then it became progressively more fresh as it got filtered out. There was this natural ecosystem process.
Hmm.
And because of these industrial agricultural plants, they divert the water to the St. Johns River on one side and the Cataloochee, I forget the name of the river, on the other side. And essentially, it's not draining and cleaning how it's supposed to. So we're getting incredible amounts of toxic blue green algae and exacerbation of our red tide in the Gulf. These are things that are as a result of the nitrates blooming from all of this runoff from the agriculture and from the water not being able to properly clean itself. Well, Debbie gives subsidies to Big Sugar. We're actually, instead of penalizing them with, let's say, fines for polluting, we actually subsidize Big Sugar.
Mhm.
And she takes an exorbitant amount of money from Big Sugar. So, it's you could just connect the dots. If you're taking money from them and you're giving them subsidies and they're polluting and you're not standing up for us, you're representing them,
Mhm.
right? So it's really obvious at this point that that's what's going on.
So correct me if I'm wrong about the geography. I actually know where Lake Okeechobee is because I used to drive from the West Coast to the East Coast to visit family, and that is stuck right in the middle, and you kind of have to either go
Yeah.
south or go north around it. But am I right that you're talking about a journey for water of hundreds of miles right down to the Everglades? So what's happening,
Uh-huh.
what Big Sugar is doing is affecting the ecosystems hundreds of miles away. Am I right about that?
Yes. Yes, that is exactly right, and people don't realize that, and not only it even goes further north than that in
Mhm.
terms of some of the problems we have with other types of construction issues, but yes, because if you were to look at a map of the state of Florida, like, there's these antique maps that I've seen, it's really cool, back from when natives would draw, like, cartography in these charts. Florida, where I'm standing, wasn't land. It was all marsh, all swamp, and it all was part of the Everglades. We brought it in, built it up, and built canals diverting the water. So now we have this complete canal driven man made system that is not natural. It doesn't benefit the ecosystem, and it's having issues cleaning itself.
Mhm.
And it's affecting everything down here.
Wow, that's an amazing observation about the way in which the whole ecosystem is affected just by this one industry there. At the top of your issues, a few of the policies that you support, you have something relating to policing and
Yeah.
specifically ending federal programs that provide military equipment to local police officers. I'm wondering if you jump that to the top of the list since you started campaigning just because of the transformation of the conversation in the country.
Yeah, well, let me be clear that criminal justice reform has always been it was one of my top 3 issues always. I'm a criminal justice lawyer.
Yes.
That has
Mm.
always been an issue that's very important to me. And policing is really just the first step in a very, very messed up process that is completely discriminatory from start to finish. So I have generally focused more on the post arrest type of area of criminal justice reform and being a lawyer. That's more of what I have focused on. But I have been very aware that the process starts from elementary school, from how we label children, whether or not we put them in diversion programs, whether
Mhm.
or not we start putting 5 and 6-year-old kids in handcuffs and bringing them out of elementary schools. So this is an issue, and it's definitely racially disproportionate.
Mhm.
So I've been very aware of this. But yeah, I mean, more people are now wanting to talk about it. But I am very, like, nobody would look at me and my platform and think we're just talking about this now because it's current. we are just talking more about one end of it
Mhm.
versus more of the judicial side of it.
Right, that's a great observation about your background. You've got a history of really working on behalf of folks in the criminal justice system as a defense lawyer. And I guess my question was, have you seen a shift? I think you just kind of hinted at that, a shift in the way people want to address that, especially people who might not have been comfortable talking directly about police violence and also, frankly, racism.
I think that it's every time there's an incident, okay, whether it started with like Rodney King back in the day, as soon as we started having like cameras and phones and stuff, every time there's an incident, I feel like infinitely more and more people get woke, right? Like, one more person looks at that and is like, that's just not right. So I have seen a nice influx of people into that zone of awareness of police brutality, and that's been really great. I'll take it any way we can get it. Um, but no, it's a big problem, and it's a problem here. It's a problem everywhere. We have a problem with our own Sunrise Police Department. They still haven't released the autopsy report of a case that they won't even tell us what happened over a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
And there was 16-year-old that they chased into a lake and he drowned. So there, and we can't get to the bottom of that. So we have issues across the board. But I've known for years that how black people and white people are treated by the police is completely different. Completely different.
And I know you're really focusing and talking on to Democratic primary voters right now, but should you win the primary, you would be obviously in a general election, heavily Democratic district, so you'd probably be a shoe-in to be in Congress. I'm wondering if you're hearing that same conversation on race and on police from not Democrats, but Republicans and independents. I've noted, and I don't want to overstate the point, that there are a whole bunch of folks, I don't know how to quantify that across the nation, white people, Republicans who are saying, I always thought of myself not as a racist, but this really opened my eyes
Yeah.
as to really what's happening in the country. And it makes them even question their support of Republicans and Trump and anybody who's supporting police. I'm just trying to get a sense of that kind of conversation if you're hearing that.
I I find that, and I think a lot of it also is just my approach and how I talk to people. For
Mhm,
example, most of the people hanging out at this particular polling place are this is a very Republican area. So a
mm,
lot of the people coming in here are voting the Republican ticket. I get along with all people. Like, I don't have a problem. The first thing you do is you find the common ground. And as soon as people realize, oh, we're not treating everybody the same, it's not so hard to sort of bring up this conversation as to what we can do to fix those things. And I really kind of just leave party out of it. I don't really, I mean, yes, our phone banking and canvassing operations, sure, we're only targeting Democrats right now to get out the vote. But I've been talking with Republicans and non-party affiliates for more than a year now. A lot of them have switched over to be able to vote for me, because we do have closed primaries, unfortunately. But I talk to everybody. I helped create this bipartisan citizens election audit by merging my friends at the Progressive Caucus with my new friends at the Southwest Broward Republican organization. And so they all want fair elections.
mhm.
I find that it's easy for me to find common ground.
Now, I think this is the first time you've run for electoral office. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Now, obviously, it's a completely different animal given the pandemic, but putting the pandemic aside, what's that been like as a candidate? You've been obviously active in politics for a very long time. What's that been like? How has it changed your life? Would you do it again?
Um, you know, everybody wants to know if I'll do it again. I It's hard to say. I feel like if I don't, I'm letting a whole bunch of people down that really think that we have a good chance this time. But if we don't, like, I mean, it's definitely takes a while to build up name recognition and to build coalitions. And it's really just a fight of time. So the question
Mm.
is, were we able to do it in this amount of time, or do we still need to keep building until we can get enough people to cross over? It's been it's been really, you know what? It's been a privilege. It's been a privilege. I Most people will never have the opportunity to do this because of the way our system is. That's one of many reasons I support publicly financed elections. Is everybody should have the opportunity to serve their community, and that's what this is. It's a term of service. It's not a career. And we need to demonstrate that by living that. So we've been running a service based campaign the entire time I've been running. Our campaign volunteers have been doing food distributions, veterans nursing homes, park cleanups ever since I started this. We call ourselves Gen Core. And I always said that win or lose, we would keep that going. So at a minimum, I'll be having my community service organization still going around and doing all sorts of stuff. As far as dealing with the politics and the establishment, it's pretty brutal. These people are very happy with the way things are. They don't want change. Most of them are old and white and very comfortable, and they like the way things are. They don't care who Debbie takes money from. They don't care that she talks about Trump but then gives him more money. This doesn't bother them. They're willing to look past that just because they like her. So, that's what I'm dealing with in terms of the politics, the party politics in our area. Bye, Mary. Um, that's Weston City Commissioner right there. So, it's just at this point, I accepted that this would be the way it was. I remember how it was for Tim when he ran in 16. I wasn't expecting them to welcome me with open arms by any stretch. So we've been basically being ghosted,
Mhm.
which is actually the best we could hope for because they haven't really been working against me as much as they probably would have if they didn't already know me.
And I see you wiping your brow there, so I assume
Oh
it's
my God,
kinda
it's so hot. It's
it's
so hot.
hey, it's Florida, it's August, what'd you expect? I
Which is why we have elections here in August in Florida. It's voter suppression. Less people come out, keep low turnout.
Yeah, that's interesting, not just because it's hot, but August in typical years is often a time when people are on vacation, they go away, but
Yeah.
mail balloting has really helped that because you can actually cast your ballot before you decide to go on vacation. I asked you about campaigning, and I'm going to wrap up our conversation here and let you get out to actually campaign in a couple of minutes. I asked you also as a personal matter, how has it changed your life? Because you're a hard worker, you've been active in politics, you're uh, a lawyer. How has it changed your life, and what have you noticed that's different in politics and running for office that you maybe didn't care for or you found actually fun?
Uh, it's changed my life in that I kind of don't have a life anymore. So there's that. This is not just a full-time job. This is a life. Like this
Mm,
has been my life for now over a year and a half. So I don't think I'll be able to tell you how my actual life has changed until I get back into my regular life. Like it's hard to say right now. Um, it's been interesting. I'll tell you what, you learn who your friends are really quickly. You learn who your friends are, you learn who you can't trust. You really see things um from a very different perspective. But I actually, for the most part, I've really had a good time with this.
mm.
I
Eh
really have. I mean, look, there's aggravating things about any business venture in general. The only thing that's really extra hard about campaigning is that imagine having a short term business venture. So there's no time for a learning curve, right? Like if you mess up, you can't say, oh, we'll do it better next time. There is no next time. Like this was your opportunity to hit that target date or whatever it was, right? So that's what makes them hard and why people don't often win the first time is it's such a learning curve. And so with a business, if you do something that isn't great and you change it, it'll help you in the long term. By the time you do that in a campaign, your campaign's over. So um I think it's been very enlightening to do this. But I haven't, you know what, I wasn't too surprised. I pretty much got treated exactly how I thought I would get treated by the sycophants in our district. So it was not shocking to me.
But on the other hand, I assume as an insurgent, someone who is running for the right reason, meaning a vision, policies, not just to get a position to for yourself. I assume you've drawn people to your campaign and that's been inspiring the kinds of new friends you've made because they're probably getting into it for the right reason.
Yeah, a whole bunch of people. I've made some friendships that are amazing because absolutely from it's more coalition building and just the people I've met because we have been doing so much service that I've met so many people with organizations and I've been able to connect so many different things. I almost feel like I'm the center of a web in this campaign and I've been able to like connect so many different things whether it's helping small businesses or connect this service with this person. Like it's just been really it's been great. And I've made an amazing amount of connections. I mean, I can call Andrew Yang, which is pretty cool.
Hmm. That must be an interesting conversation.
He's great. He is so, you know what though? I've been hanging around. My husband is really kind of nerdy and stuff. I've been hanging around with like smart boys like that my whole life. So it was kind of, to me, it didn't feel that out of the ordinary talking to him. He's just very bright and very reasonable. And he's just a good guy. He just wants to he has a vision and wants to make a change. And I
Yeah,
respect it.
I have to say I watched him in the presidential debates and I tweeted at one point, I may not agree with some of his thing positions. For example, the universal basic income, I'm skeptical a little bit about that. But you can actually see a mind working there and someone trying to think about things as opposed to a lot of the vapid responses that people give.
Exactly. He brought something new to the table. And that is something I really very much appreciate, because most of them are all just exactly the same, just different identity politic, different forms of each other. And he actually brought something new to the table. And like you said, I don't agree with him on every issue by any stretch, but he is a person of science and reason. And when people of science and reason come together, we can come to amazing solutions.
Mm.
And that's really what it comes down to, is just not being beholden to special interests and really trying to come up with practical solutions. Um, and yeah, and also he's not a party insider. And so that's way refreshing.
So last question to you. Okay, it's a few days until the vote is final, meaning the actual election day, but we know a lot of people are voting. Obviously, you're talking to voters. That's your main mission, right? What else are you doing the next few days?
Basically, we're my campaign manager and I are just driving around to all the early voting places. We mingle with people. We make sure that our signs are up. I'm bringing food to my volunteers. I'm delivering purple ponchos to them. We're like the purple group. And we have been every evening canvassing on top of this. So, like, we'd be out in the field all day and then go canvassing. But tonight, I actually think I'm not going to canvass because I have an 8 o'clock uh, panel that I have to participate in. So, I think I'm going to escape canvassing tonight. We'll see. He'll probably make me canvas somewhere. I don't know.
Campaign managers, they're just slave drivers. They're brutal, right?
He is. He's harsh. He's actually my partner. We started this together. We have a very unusual situation. I didn't decide to run and then hire a campaign manager. He and I were friends. He had the idea that I should do this, and we've been doing it together.
So thank you very much for being on the show. We'll have you back when you're the nominee of the Democratic Party.
Thank you so much for having me on.